Hi everyone. Today we're going to be taking a look at all the stuff that I'm working with my feet on my live rig. And we've got a bunch of stuff going on here. Some of it is very organ-like and some of it is more techno and ambient music oriented stuff. I have a custom foot controller over here. I have a pedal board. In organ terms, pedal board means the big keyboard that you play with your feet for bass notes. In guitar terminology, pedal board means all this stuff over here, the effects pedals that one uses to, reverb, chorus, distortion, whatever you're using on your guitar. Now, my music uses a lot of looping, a lot of echo effects that are timed to the tempo of the music, and I use very thick and sometimes impossible reverbs to create the immersive and ambient effects that I'm looking for in the music I create. So if we kind of go left to right here, I've got another camera set up when we get over to that board so we can take a closer look at things there. So the first thing here is a Studio Logic MP117. This is a foot pedal unit, and it's plugged into my organ emulator the same way like a full 32 note pedal board underneath a conventional organ would be. This kind of pedal board, this with the little shorty pedals like this, comes from kind of the home organ market on the smaller spinet size, easy play instruments from the 70s. They'd have a pedal board like this. And then in the late 70s, Moog came up with the idea of using that style of pedal board to create a bass synthesizer. And Geddy Lee of Rush was one of the first to really glom onto this on their fifth album, Farewell to Kings. He had the Taurus pedal, and then he had a mini Moog, and they did a lot of stuff with that. Eventually, Geddy would have two of pedal boards like this, one over by his main microphone so that he could play stuff, not just bass notes, but also melody notes with his foot. And then when he was over behind the keyboards, obviously this would be used to cover the bass notes so you didn't lose that while he was busy with his hands on the keys rather than on his bass guitar. In the 80s, when Rush did all of their keyboard stuff, a lot of that was actually triggered and run by Neil Peart of all things. So Geddy Lee had two of these pedal boards. Alex Lifeson had a pedal board like this. Geddy also had keyboards, and then Neil had similar MIDI controllers, both for feet and for mallet percussion style stuff. And then he put MIDI triggers not only on the drums but on the cymbals. So as if the intricate drum parts he was doing were not intricate and complicated enough, he decided, I need more to do, so let me have a bunch of MIDI gear all over my drum set. So anyway, these days these are just strictly a MIDI controller. This one has other basic functions you can tap into from these buttons, but pretty much it's just set to MIDI channel 4. I have that assigned to the pedal division on the organ emulator, and then these are my bass notes. Here we have just a regular volume pedal, and then this is just a simple foot switch, and this controls the damper pedal function when I'm playing piano style sounds. So now let's switch to the other camera and take a closer look at the custom control board over here. So we have some organ style controls here. These are called toe studs, and I use these because since I'm in the organ repair business, I have a lot of them. I like these because they're a nice big sturdy switch that I can hit with my foot and get and get a very positive feel out of it. The RC600 here has the more conventional little foot buttons, and those are okay. But if I was going to use that style button for this area here, well, then I'd have to build like a little box and all this rigmarole, whereas the toe studs, I could mount them just directly to the base board of this box that I built. So the RC600 is a 6-track looper system. I have 3 tracks available at any one time. I can switch screens, as it were, and I have 4, 5, and 6. The buttons up here do different functions depending on which screen I'm on. It's also a rhythm unit. It has several different. It has the famous 808 drum machine and 909 drum machine, as well as drum loops recorded by real musicians on real drums, and you can use all that. It's also a multi-effects processor, but not a very good one, and I've talked before about why I don't really use the internal effects on the RC600, but something I do use is the fact that this is an audio MIDI interface. It has 8 audio channels processed internally from the computer. It has an additional 6 audio inputs that are, standard 1/4 inch and XLR inputs, and then it has 6 standard audio outputs as well as MIDI in and out. So I really do quite a lot with this. So the way it's set up is the computer is connected to this by USB cable. So all of the organ tones are then processed by the RC600 and then routed through the looper tracks and then to the various outputs that I have arranged as 3 stereo pairs. Now, also, what I want to do on this board is have all of my effects processing down here on like these style pedals. Right now, my effects are processed by this big rack unit here. I have 3 multi-effects processors and set to run off of the 3 stereo outputs from the RC600. And this thing is really big and clunky. This equipment is not really designed to be knocked around like it's being knocked around by carrying this rack with me everywhere. And really going over to these style foot switch type effects processors is going to be a better thing. So these are sitting here just kind of as placeholders so you can see what I'm going to have eventually. My 2 little mixers are going to be back here, so then all of the sound processing equipment is going to be down on this unit here, and then just with a few cables I can plug the thing in and we're off and running. So let's take a little deeper look in here. So if we lift this panel off, we see that we have our outputs from the audio interface system. So here's our USB. This comes from the computer, and so all of the audio, digital audio coming off of the organ emulator on the computer comes in here, is routed into the looper, and then to an output here. I have the outputs as 3 stereo pairs. Then there's the headphone jack that I'm using to route the click track off of the rhythm machine, and that's pretty much all I do. This way I can have the click track only in my earpiece along with the audio outputs, but then these are going to go out to effects processors and then on to the audience. These 2 cords here are connected to the foot switches here. And what happens is when I hit a foot switch here, it sends the signal into the RC600, And this is where we're employing its MIDI functions. I can assign a controller function to each of these 4 push buttons. Those come in here, are converted into a MIDI signal, and then that goes out into the system. And in this case, I've got my increment and decrement set up. So let's say I've got, something playing here and I need to go to the next. Or I need to go to the previous. And then that's handled by a handy foot switch. That way, if I'm busy and I, can't quite reach the the thumb pistons, I've got another way of controlling the presets on the organ emulator that we talked about before. These 2 are just a standard foot switch, and they go via just regular wires on up to the SL88, and they control the increment and decrement up and down function for the programs that are on the SL88. So you see I'm getting a lot of work out of the RC600. It's the primary audio signal processor. It's also part of the MIDI system. I can control things through it, and I could do even more. There's a 3rd level to all of the buttons on the RC600. The first 2 levels control the looping and the click track and the up and down, so I've got everything I need there. I could go to that 3rd level and assign all of these buttons to be some kind of MIDI function if I need that down the road. And but right now it's just my audio MIDI interface and my looper, and then the effects are elsewhere. And like I said, the effects processors that are in the RC600 are not really that good, and so I'm not using them, and I'm using other effects processors. Of course, the RC600 is outstanding as a looper, and I think I'm using it quite a bit. So let's lift this off carefully here. This is my umbilical that runs back over to the rack, and again, once I have the effects processors and mixing on here, this will just be some short cables that'll plug in. Take all of this off, and now we see the guts of the system itself. Now, rather than have like a plug strip in here and all of the little wall wart external power supplies that run the various devices here, I've gone with this switching power supply. This is a 12 volt, I think 20 amp power supply, so it produces way more than I need in terms of power. And then it's patched directly over here for 12 volts. And then I have this regulator circuit that breaks it down to 9 volts. And that goes over here. So I have these strips here, and then those head out to these plugs over on the back of this board, and then I can plug in here to get the power up topside for like the SL88. It runs on 9 volts, and also for the pedal board it runs on 12 volts, or no, it runs on 9 volts as well. This is the wiring for just the simple foot switches. Those again go out onto one of these cables to go upstairs for the SL88. These 4 switches are plugged into these relay circuits. And I've talked about that issue before. Because these switches are ultimately going into the back of the RC600 to produce a MIDI signal, they have to be configured in such a way that they're communicating with the RC600 the way it wants to be communicated with. So switches, let's do that here. So switches are either normal on or normal open. So when you press the switch, you push to close, and now we have contact between our 2 points, and then the event is triggered. But the other way to do a switch is to have it normal closed, and when we push on it, it opens up, and then that triggers the event. And that's all dependent on how the internal electronics are configured for whatever device you're trying to work with. So in this case, the RC600 wants to see a normal closed switch that then when we push, we open it. Now these toe studs, they just don't do that. They are a normal open, you push to close. So in order to have a switch that was normal closed, push to open, I have these push buttons triggering these relays, which have both a normal open and a normal closed switch on them. So then I connect the normal closed side of each of these. Those go over into this wiring, plug into the back of the RC600. Now it's getting the electrical signal it likes to hear, and then can in turn send out the MIDI functions that I've asked it to. In this case, it's MIDI controller 20, 21, 22, 23, set as a simple on and off configuration. When you want to use a controller as an on and off switch or as a toggle switch, you simply set it, you program it in your machine to be high and low. So when this makes its contact, it pushes the controller high, 127. When it's let go, it pushes the controller to 0. So this is set as a momentary, so each time I hit this, I'm getting a 127 value on controller 20. So that's a lot of complicated way to say on, off. And then this is our down function, same thing, on, off. These two I haven't assigned anything yet. Haven't got really anything that I need to do with that. But once we get our effects processors set onto this board, then I'll no longer need to carry around this great big rack over here. And also, you know, this stuff is just kind of getting beat up, whereas this will be a little more protected. So there you have it. We've got keyboards, we've got computer, we've got looper, we've got foot controls, we've got pedal keyboard, we've got volume pedal, we've got damper pedal, we've got all kinds of things going on, and it all has to communicate, for the most part, as MIDI functions of some kind. There's only a couple of things on here that are controlled as a non-MIDI function that are just a simple foot switch, but for the most part we're taking MIDI controller values, MIDI note values, and all of that kind of thing, and plugging it all together into the computer, and by assigning it to specific things on that pipe organ emulator, I get all of the functionality I need to perform my music live. So this is how it works. In the studio, when I'm on that computer screen in my DAW software, and I've got my organ keyboard going in there, I can do anything, right? I can, have multiple tracks. I can have any kind of effects device I want. But then I have to think about, okay, well, how am I going to do that live? Because to me, music is meaningless if you can't perform it live. And so it's all of this other gear here that makes that possible. It takes the place of all of that stuff that's exclusively in the studio environment on the computer, and now I can take it out on the road. So anyway, that's it for today. See you next time.